But what I want to do in the time that I've left is I want to share with you a couple of techniques for actually resolving grief. You know, whenever I attend a workshop on grief, I usually hear people talk about grief, and that's actually what I've been doing the last 2 hours. I've been talking about grief, and that's great. Sometimes in talking about things, we can develop insight, it can give us strategies to help us be more effective with people. Didactic learning is certainly useful. But in addition to didactic learning, I like to demonstrate some things. And when I have clients in my office, I try to help them experience a range of different experiences, ranging from experiences that they can feel. Those would be kinetic experiences. Experiences that they can visualize. I think visualization is a very useful tool in therapy. It can help my client really put pieces of a puzzle together, if you will. And my clients also need to have an auditory component to therapy where they hear themselves. Now, each one of us has a primary representational system. By that, I mean each one of us primarily is visual, or primarily is auditory, or is primarily kinesthetic in the way we experience and relate to the world. The way we learn is primarily visual. For example, when you buy something at the store, like let's say a desk at Walmart or Home Depot, what do you do with that desk? Do you read the directions and follow the directions, putting it together?
I do.
That's an auditory person. Or do you take the pile of stuff, put it in a clump, feel it, and start building?
That's it.
There you go, there's our kinesthetic person. Or the rest of you are like me. You look at the picture of the box, you look at the stuff on the pile, you take two of them, you hold them up to the box, and eventually you build the picture on the box. That's your visual learner, okay? So we have auditory, visual, and kinesthetic ways of relating to the world. Within each one of these primary representational systems, this is a crash course in neurolinguistic programming for you, each one of us within the context of those representational systems, we experience these things with various submodalities. Submodalities are the characteristics of the representational system. So in other words, if you're a visual person, and I gave you that assignment earlier, or that exercise with overwhelm earlier, and I asked you to close your eyes and think of the things that were overwhelming to you, did you visualize them far away or close to you? See, that's a submodality. Did you visualize them as colorful or as black and white? Did you visualize those things that were overwhelming as big and tall and lifelike, or did you see them as small? Those are the submodalities. And each one of us, when we visualize or when we feel the tactile kinesthetic, or when we hear ourselves or hear the voice of somebody else, we experience that with different characteristics, qualities, and attributes. For example, do you ever take a minute to still your mind and just listen to yourself? Anyone ever do that?
Yes.
Awesome. Not just schizophrenics do that.
I know.
Regular people do that too. And when they listen to what they have to say, do you listen to it loudly, closely? Do you listen to it as if you're talking to yourself? Or do you listen to yourself as if you're somebody talking to you, second person, third perceptual position? These are all submodalities. Is it loud? Is it quiet? This is how we experience things. Now,
And you say they are characteristics of what?
those are the submodalities within each of our representational systems. Okay. So the first thing that I want to deal with actually is an adaptation of a NLP pattern by therapist Stephen and Connie Ray Andreas, well-known Arizonian psychotherapist, and they have developed a lot of patterns for problem solving. And I cannot remember the title of the book, but he wrote extensively about grief processes and using our clients' representational systems, the way they picture experiences, etc., to help them come to a point of acceptance. Now, because this is a short workshop, I have distilled an adaptation, if you will, of his model for creating a template for resolving grief. And I want to share with you the methods of that are helpful. And it really involves 3 stages or 3 processes. The first is have a client discover how they represent the state of felt presence. Now think about this for a minute. Think about felt presence as a state. Okay? do you ever feel like somebody's present with you? Have you ever, for example, been with your spouse or been with your kid or been with your parent and they're right there, they're right next to you, and you're not even talking, but you just feel their presence, you're comforted by that, you know that they're there. Felt presence is just the experience of sharing with somebody. You know, Ernest Rossi actually called hypnotherapy, but psychotherapy, he actually called it belly button to belly button communication. That was his metaphor for really being in rapport with somebody and being in sync with somebody else. And so you probably had that experience where you're not even talking to somebody, but it's belly button to belly button communication. How many of you are close enough to your spouse or partner or kid or somebody else that they'll take action based on what you think without you even having to say it? Does that ever happen to you?
Yes.
Or do you take action on what they're thinking without them? It's not that you have ESP, it's that you're in such deep rapport with somebody who you feel close to that their presence in your life is something that's very real to you. That is what I mean by the state of felt presence. And so what I want to do is I want to find out from my client, how do they experience the state of felt presence? Because we all experience it in different ways. And this is going to be one of the keys to helping our clients resolve grief. And the way to have a client express to us how they experience felt presence is to ask them to think of a loved one who's alive, but in their life, but not with them at this moment. So for example, let's say my wife was not here and I was the client, I would say, well, you know, I'm thinking about my wife who's not here, but you know, I can bring the feeling or the sensation of her being here with me. We have a good relationship, and you know, this is how I experience it. I feel a sense of warmth. That would be very kinesthetic. Or, you know, I see her smile. That would be visual. Or, you know, I hear her her kind words. That would be very auditory. Do I hear it loudly? Do I see it clearly? Do I feel it intently? These are all the submodalities of that experience. And I really want to take time with my client to really experience, how do they experience a state of felt presence? In other words, how do they, you know, without grief, without death, how do they, in normal real life, experience the feeling of closeness, the feeling of felt presence? If you're a C.S. Lewis fan, the feeling of storge love. Before we talk about erotic love, eros, we talk about agape love, you know, we talk about philia love. We never talk about storge love, that affinity towards another person, another Greek word for love. And so that would be, you know, how does a person really experience that? And I want my client to really get in touch with, in normal life, what that is like for them. They could also, as an alternative to thinking about a loved one who's not with them but is still in their life, they could think of a deceased person who they had a sense of love, a sense of comfort, and a sense of positive response to. I'm going to out you here a little, but we were talking about the break, similar experiences. One difficult experience with grief, and then one very positive, very beautiful experience with death. And so if I was the client here, or he was a client, I might have you think of that experience with your mother's death or my grandmother's death. It was very positive, that we have positive feelings and attachments too. Because when I think about my grandparents, I have a very positive feeling. Even though I miss them and I wish I could call them at midnight or stop by and get some business advice from my grandpa, the reality is when I just close my eyes and think about them, it's as if they're with me. And it's really a great thing because they were part of my life so long that because they're no longer here doesn't mean they're not a part of my life. And so that's another way to get a client to express a healthy sense of felt presence. What this does is it gives me the ability to establish a baseline. So then when I use the word break state in NLP, which is a therapeutic technique, what I'm really doing is bringing the client back to kind of right now, the here and now. Okay? Because I've just gone through a process of revivification of either, you know, an emotional situation regarding a positive death or one they responded to positively, or the experience of creating an emotional state of shared presence or felt presence. And so what I want to do is I want to, you know, break the state, kind of give them a mental saltine, you know, open your eyes. A lot of times I'll do this with clients with their eyes closed. And let them take in a breath, and then I'll ask them if they're ready to move on. Were they able to do that, create that state of felt presence? They'll say yes. And so then what I'll have them do is I will have them close their eyes again, and I want to discover here, how do they represent the lost person? How do they represent the lost person? Let's just say it's, in this situation, the death of the brother. Okay, we have the sister here, we have the death of the brother. How do they represent that death? How do they feel about it? Is it, again, a visual image where the person is distant? They can't see the brother, it's hazy, it's ghost-like, it's not like they're present? Or is it kinesthetic? They have no feelings about it. They have no emotional response to it. They feel like there's that they're not able to attend to that or tune into that feeling of their brother. Or auditory. Are they unable to hear the past? Are they unable to hear the present? When they think about this, are they unable to talk to themselves about the death? Are they unable to do this, or when they do they only remember the unpleasant things? Let's take this in terms of a child and a terminal illness, which is certainly something devastating and certainly we'll deal with as we deal with grief. Does the person whose child just died, did they think of the illness? Do they think of the accident? Do they think of the trauma? How do they represent this lost person? And we'll find when a person is having difficulty with grief, there are often negative associations here, difficult associations here, undeveloped associations here, submodalities that aren't clear, and representational systems that are confusing to them. This is often what we'll find. And so this can be distressing for a client, and because I don't believe people need to be miserable in order to get well in therapy, I'll break the state. Have them open their eyes, okay? Maybe even get a Kleenex if they need to. Just mentally reorient to the room again. Great. Now we can go back and we can close the eyes for part 3 of this exercise. And in part 3, what I want to do is I want to replace the states of the lost person one by one with the state of felt presence. In other words, I want to move a person to, let's say their state of felt presence was, close. The person's right next to them. The person's talking to them. They can see that person clearly. But their lost person state is, a chasm between them, unable to hear their voice, not really able to clearly create a mental image of their of that person, or only seeing that person in a vulnerable or sick or unhealthy state. In fact, one of the things that I have was my grandfather, just hours before he died, he was still talking and going. He wasn't in an unconscious state, and he knew his time was up. And I actually have a picture of me, there talking to my grandfather. He's in the bed, and he's got the oxygen mask on, and he's hours away from death. And I really want to delete this picture. I really don't want that to be my last image of my last time with my grandfather. I haven't deleted it yet, but I never look at the picture, but I know it exists, and I have it on my hard drive. Fortunately, that is not my representation of that lost person. But there are a lot of people who it is. So I want to integrate piece by piece in an exercise, having them integrate the submodalities of the felt presence into the image of the lost person, essentially replacing them. So that when the exercise is done, what they actually have is the experience of felt presence with the lost person. This can be a tremendous process for helping a grieving person change the characteristic and the quality of how they experience grief and loss. It doesn't even have to be a long process. I don't know who made up the rule that therapy needs to be 2 days a week, 50 weeks a year for 10 years in order to make change. This can be, although profoundly impacting a client, a process that can actually take 5, 10, 15 minutes. Well, I'd like to demonstrate. Is there somebody who would like to who would like to go through this process with me?
I would.
You would? All right, come on up here. Come on up here. Have a seat over here, and thanks for.
I'm in the grief process that maybe shouldn't be a kind of.
No, I want people to be able to deal with reality, and so you're in the grief process, and that's fine. I'm going to go through this, and we're not going to take a lot of time to do this, and we're not going to go to a deep level. Obviously, this is a workshop, and I want to be able to go through the process and demonstrate it so you can see how I would use it with a client. For you, this is a very real situation and a real scenario, so thanks for being willing to share that. This is not a therapy session though.
Right.
And so when we're done, I think that you'll find this to be a helpful process. You may be able to identify, and you're a therapist, so you have insight, you may be able to identify some needs that go beyond here that you might want to address with either a friend or a family member, a clergy person, or even another coworker or a professional therapist, if you need to. So, you said, I'm in the process of dealing with grief, certainly understandable. No matter what a relationship with a person is like, if we have a child with a person, that person is always going to be an important part of our life for forever. And so that's, certainly something that's very appropriate to deal with. So thanks. The first stage of this, and when I outlined the 3 steps, did it kind of make sense to you? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, is there somebody in your life who you're close with right now? I mean, whose company you enjoy, a family member or a friend, or somebody who you have a real positive, healthy, happy relationship with in life right now? Coworker, parent, friend, spouse?
My daughter.
Your daughter? Okay, great. How old's your daughter?
22.
Okay, awesome, great. I'm going to have you close your eyes, because I think a lot of times when we close our eyes, it just helps us to detach from the sound of the dental drill next door. It helps us detach from the classroom sitting in front of us. And just anywhere in your body you're carrying tension, you can just let go of that tension. Just sort of take a minute and relax a little bit. Now, I want you to think about your daughter. She's 22 and she's close to you. She's an important person in your life. And she's not with us because she's not in the classroom. But does she live here in Tulsa, or does she live outside? She lives here in Tulsa?
She lives in that bedroom that I wanted to be my office.
All right. So she's there. She's in your house. But is she at work right now or at home?
She's at home.
She's at home? Okay, great. So just go ahead and close your eyes and think about your daughter. She's not actually with you because she's at home right now and you're over here at this workshop. But bring her, metaphorically, here into your presence. It's amazing how a parent can feel the presence of a child, even if that child is off at college thousands of miles away, or in the armed forces in another land, or even just across town. Okay? And now, here's the question. When you think about felt presence, when you think about your daughter, do you primarily see her, or do you primarily feel her? Is she touching you, or when you think about your daughter and felt presence, do you hear her, or all 3 of those things?
A couple of things. I see her and I feel her.
Okay, you see her and you feel her. Mm-hmm. Do you see her close, or do you see her far?
I see her at a distance.
Okay. And do you see her life size, or do you see her small?
I see her life size.
Okay. And do you see her at 22, or do you see her at an earlier part of life?
At 22.
Okay, great. And you said you also feel her presence. How do you feel it? How does the feeling of feeling your daughter feel?
I guess I feel what she's portraying.
Okay.
Strength, confidence,
so you feel emotionally the feelings that you perceive her as feeling.
Yes.
And you see her as strong and as confident. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Now,
I see her as portraying that.
right.
But I don't see it. When I feel her, I feel her hurting.
Okay. So you can feel the vulnerability, and do you feel
Yes.
a sense of hurt then?
Yes.
Okay. And how does that feel to you physically?
Overwhelming.
Okay.
My ears are hot. My chest.
Chest is heavy.
Yes, every part of me hurts for her.
And that's something that as a parent we often experience. We feel the feelings of a child. I think that's just a relationship that's so different than so many other relationships. All right, well, go ahead and open your eyes for a minute. Just taking a breath, okay? Mm-hmm. And thanks for taking a risk and sharing that with the group. I really appreciate it, because it's going to be really helpful to them to help people be able to resolve grief to see this process modeled, and you're making it genuine, you're making it real. So thanks for that. And so what I've done here is I've tried to get a handle on how she experiences felt presence. Emotionally, she does empathetically. She is able to create, when she said strength, did you see? She didn't have to say it, she got strong. She pointed to the feeling of heaviness in the chest, which is why I said heaviness, this is sort of that I feel heaviness, but I could see it before she ever pointed there, okay? This is very somatic, very kinesthetic, very tactile. This is very real. Now, as far as the visualization of the daughter, her daughter was life-size. Her daughter was clear. Your daughter was in living color. Your daughter was farther away.
She was over there checking everything out.
And by seeing somebody far away, it gives us a whole picture of the thing. It doesn't mean they're distant. It just means we can see it all.
Yeah.
And did it feel pretty good to think about your daughter?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. See, this is a positive experience. Okay. This is how she experiences felt presence, kinesthetically and
I was happy
visually.
that she was here.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, she needs to be here, and this needs to be where she needs to
Sure. Well, and you can
be. Learning more information.
Yeah, and you can share some of
I
these
agree.
things that are helpful to her too. Okay.
Yeah.
So we break the state, talk to him a little bit. Now, the next part, we're going to take a couple of minutes, and so this is why I like doing this kind of work. She just said thank you to me, and I want them through the process. So these kind of things can really help a person, and that's why I like doing these kind of demonstrations rather than just talking about these things. The next part, if it's uncomfortable for you, that's okay, because discomfort can be part of the grief process. And you told me you were in the middle of grief. Now, I don't know which stage you're in. It doesn't really matter to me which stage you're in. You're allowed to experience that. Okay, so you don't have to feel one way or another. You can just feel whatever's really real. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So go ahead and close your eyes again, and just take in a breath. And I want you to think of that lost person.
Oh.
That's a way of phrasing it. And if it becomes too emotionally tense for you, you could step out of you for a minute and watch you thinking about that lost person. That's a skill called dissociation that for some reason in psychotherapy we think is bad, but is an awesome coping strategy for dealing with trauma or grief or loss. And so I'll let you be the judge of whether or not you need to do that. And you don't even need to tell me if you're doing that, okay? You can experience this the way that's most comfortable for you, okay? And when you think about the lost person, and you think about it, how do you experience this? Is it visual also? How's the visualization of your ex-husband?
It's like I see myself more than I see him.
Okay.
And I see myself getting him up out of the bed. It's like I had to disassociate to do that.
Okay.
To place myself where he was, because I wouldn't be there ordinarily. And I'm getting him up out of the bed, and I see myself putting his arm over my shoulder saying, come on, we're going to the doctor to get help.
So you hear yourself talking to him also?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
And he's not talking to you?
No.
Okay. And you see him sick, you see him unwell?
Yes.
Okay. And your visualization of him, you have a hard time seeing him. It's really you see you responding to him.
I see him, but not see. It's like this picture is totally different from seeing my daughter. This picture is kind of like, like if you were, the look of when you are seeing a hospital room or a psychiatric color in a movie, that kind of greenish, grayish type color, like there's not any color in it.
Right. Sort of the shades of the color or the life being removed from it.
Yes.
Okay. How do you feel in your chest? Is it different or the same?
It's different.
Okay, how is it different?
It's different, like, I feel like I'm doing something. I'm helping. So it's not painful. It's just that that sense of I'm here now, and it's gonna be okay.
All right, taking a breath.
Like a relief.
Okay. Just taking a breath, open your eyes. Okay, and this is again breaking the state. Okay, and now you sort of take a breath. Okay,
Yeah.
and I know this may be difficult. How do you feel right now?
I feel actually I feel surprised
Okay.
because when you were talking about kinesthetics, that being a person who feel, I know since he has passed, the feelings that I felt went back to our relationship, which were kind of like off limits. You know, I had set those boundaries not to, feel those feelings.
And now.
And I thought when I came here, and if you would have took me there, it's like, oh no, I'm not supposed to feel those feelings, and I didn't want to feel those feelings, and so. But when you said, I think that's why I said, okay, I'll just have to disassociate,
Right.
so I won't feel what I really want to feel.
And I let the client have control of when they need to dissociate or not. It's not for me to decide when they need to. You know, I really believe that the person I'm working with knows you're an insightful person. You're a healthy person. You can make those determinations. The third phase of this then is really produces some very interesting response, because you have a template for felt presence. What we have often in grief and loss is the inability to associate felt presence with the person who's lost. Instead, we associate those negative feelings, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an exercise where you begin to allow yourself to experience felt presence, even though he's dead. And then by feeling felt presence, you can take that.
Maybe X-rated.
That's perfectly okay and perfectly.
I might get my last,
Right. That's what marriage is all about, folks. So that's certainly, and that's
y'all use all y'all skills before I go there.
That's right. Exactly. But definitely one of those experiences. So I want a person to be able to create a point where they're able to use that template for felt presence with the person who's been lost. Because right now, as we can see, she's associated only that one. You had many years with him, and some were difficult, some weren't so great, but some obviously were.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to take those submodalities in her template for felt presence and apply them to the lost person. The reason why? Because then she'll be able to leave from here. She'll be able to leave from here, and leave from here empowered by the fact that she has control over how she experiences grief and loss. She's no longer at the mercy of those difficult or unpleasant experiences or times, being able to fully associate into even those X-rated times, even those emotionally good times, even those family good times, even those times that were difficult but good for you. So go ahead and close your eyes again. Okay. And taking a breath. And again, this process doesn't need to take a lot of time, but I want you to think about your daughter and the visual imagery of her. See her in the distance where you can see the entire picture. And now see yourself seeing your ex-husband tall, in life-size form, in the distance. Are you able to do that? Okay. No?
Not in the distance.
Okay. Do you see him life-size and up close?
Yes, very
Okay.
close.
All right. And that's bringing that felt presence up close. Now, you said that you felt presence for your daughter, you could hear her. Bring that submodality into that image of your husband, being able to hear him. Maybe not even specifically what he says, but hearing his voice. Now the feeling. It seems to me that to some extent that image of that lost person was far, but you could feel your daughter's presence and let yourself feel his presence, that belly button to belly button communication. Your daughter, you're comfortable with seeing the bright images and the colors. And to this point, you've only seen the grays and the greens, but replace that with a magnificent rainbow of colors, just like you're able to do with your daughter. Seeing your husband in that shirt, or with that smile, or with that colorful car. Are you able to do that? What color is it?
The stupid plaid he was on.
Awesome. Very good, very good, very good. And what I do now is I usually give my clients, really it's a hypnotic suggestion. People think hypnosis is magic. It's not. We're not doing hypnosis here. But I'm going to give her a hypnotic suggestion. That at any time over the next day or two or three, or at any time over the next week or two or three, or even at any time over the next years, that you have a need to see that plaid, to hear that voice, to see him close. You'll be able to do the same thing with his image that you are able to do now with your daughter who is with us. And by doing so, it doesn't mean that you haven't made sense out of everything, or that you don't disrespect his death. But what it does mean is that you're able to use that template for felt presence right here, right now. And by taking that with you from today's workshop, you'll not only have a CEU certificate, but the wonderful ability to experience felt presence with somebody who's been in the category of lost person. And so, taking a breath. You can even let yourself feel good about being able to make that change and see that differently. If I had and was doing a therapy, I might even let her say goodbye and keep those images. That's something you can do on your own as well, or with a therapist. And usually I'll give a person right here, right now, time to simply enjoy that. Does it feel good in this third stage? To see that plaid, to hear that voice, to have them in front? Yeah. And when clients cry at this point, these are usually tears that are different than anger or different than grief, but tears related to moving on. So, take in a breath. I'll be more than happy to spend time with you because I live across the street. But you've done a great job here. I really want to thank you for being willing to share that with us. Will you guys
Thank
give a
you.
round of
Can I just share
Yeah,
with the
please.
group?
I was going to say,
Yeah.
what I do with clients is I check the process.
What it did do, the last step was it brings you to a sense of resolve and resolution, that whatever you need, it was like, and I needed comfort from him. And it was so good that he said that that made that suggestion that I could be in that presence again. I could have that sense of presence of him, and that's what he conveyed to me, was that anytime you need me, you can still call me. You can still, you can still ask me questions. You can still, and I'll be there for you. Trust God in this process. You trusted God with me. Now, we can trust God with you. You're gonna be okay.